Hello and welcome to my channel Keen Reads. My name is Jared and today we're going to do my weekly reading update as well as a little bit of a book haul. So the first thing, I read one book this week. I actually read it over the last 2 weeks. It's been kind of a slow reading month for me. The second half of June was. But this is A Passage to India by EM Forster. So this was written in 1924 at a time when India was still a colony or a territory of Britain. And I believe it takes place around that same time in British India, for the most part. Like I said, written in 1924, this is the fifth Forster novel I've read, and probably the last one that I'll read for a while, if ever. I feel like I've kind of hit the main ones. If there are any deep cuts that you think are worth checking out, please let me know in the comments. But what I've read so far is, and I would probably rank them in this order. So the aspects of a novel, which is not necessarily bad, it's just not my cup of tea, not what I was expecting it. Actually, I don't know what I was expecting it to be because it's exactly what it sounds like from the title, but for some reason it just didn't interest me as much as books of that topic usually do. Then I have A Room with a View. And those two are probably a distant, like, fourth and fifth. The top three are closer together than they are to 4 and 5. But then at third, I would probably put A Passage to India. Second would be Maurice. And then first would be Howard's End, with Howard's End being a 5-star. And these being probably 4 stars, these next two. So enjoyed this book. Kind of in the top half. Actually, it's not technically the top half of my Forster books. And probably the last Forster book I'll read for a while. Like I mentioned, this takes place in colonial India. It follows a group of British colonizers, I guess, who go to India. They are interacting with the natives, both Muslim and Hindu Indians. And it kind of goes about exploring the relationship between colonized and colonizer. So in that way, it's kind of a colonial novel. I was reading some post-colonial criticism on it just a little bit ago, immediately after finishing the book. But again, it follows specifically a female named Adela and Quested, and then Cyril Fielding, who are kind of the key, and Mrs. Moore, who are the key British characters. And they are going to go visit some caves with a local Muslim Indian doctor or physician named Dr. Aziz. And essentially there's some misunderstanding and something happens in the caves, and it ends up with Miss Quested accusing Dr. Aziz of assault. And then the rest of the novel is following the trial and the aftermath of that assault. Supposed assault. Like I already mentioned, I did enjoy this novel. I felt like all of the themes that Mr. Forster, that EM Forster was developing worked really well together. They meshed together, and in the end, they kind of came together. Still a little ambiguously, and when I'm talking about these themes, I'm talking about the colonial tension between colonized and colonizer. Is probably the biggest theme in this novel, as well as not just the kind of the differences between that relationship, but other dynamics such as Muslims and Hindus, males and females, just kind of conflict and conflict resolution or lack of resolution between different people groups. I feel like he brings it back to kind of an ambiguous end, which I kind of liked. Reminded me of, and the plot it kind of follows those themes in the same way, in that I felt like everything was tied up very nicely at the end in a way that was satisfying to, nothing felt unnecessary. The novel was about 300 pages in the version that I read, just so that you can kind of get a gist for how long it is. There was one other thing that I wanted to say that I'm now forgetting. So I think we're going to move on from this. Oh, just a comparison of who it reminded me. It reminded me of a Graham Greene novel in ways. And actually, now that I think about that association, when I'm comparing the Graham Greene that I've read to the EM Forster, they're very similar in some ways, which makes sense because they were both from Britain, and I think writing around the same time, with Graham Greene maybe being like 20 or 30 years later. But I guess both in the way they write as well as the way they're able to wrap up their plots were just masterful. I also read the volume 1 of Biographia Literaria. Over the last 2 weeks I've read this. It's about 300 pages plus 120 page introduction. So about 450 pages or so into this book. I still have about 250 to go in volume 2, and I think I'm going to save a full review for later on, because at this point I don't know what I can say about this book. It's kind of a trip, but that's kind of where I am with Biographia Literaria. And then now moving on to the book haul, I got a haircut yesterday, and it was about an hour between the end of my workday and getting the haircut, so I stopped at a bookstore and picked up a few books. So speaking of Graham Greene, this book has been on my TBR to read actually over the next couple months, because I had another edition of it, but it was a movie title, or not a movie title, a movie cover, which I never really like, other than that Passage to India one. So I found this awesome Penguin Deluxe edition with like the French flaps and deckled edges, which I'm a fan of deckled edges. I know I hear a lot of booktubers say they're not, but I like them. I just like how soft they are. But this is The Quiet American by Graham Greene, so just got a better edition of this because it was pretty cheap at the bookstore. And I also have, I think all of the other Graham Greenes I have are in this edition. I got the other Ken Casey novel that I'm aware of, at least. So I've already read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and was not a big fan of it, but I read it really early on in my reading life, so I wonder if I read it now I'd have a different experience. But I hear that this one might be even better, which is, well, hopefully, is Sometimes a Great Notion. In this great, really perfect edition, Penguin Classics edition. I got The Critical Writings of James Joyce. So from my understanding, these are essays, literary criticism, things like that. I haven't looked too into it. But yeah, I just saw a chapter on Ibsen's new drama. So I think it's kind of literary criticism written by James Joyce, which I'm excited to get into. James Joyce is someone I haven't probably spent enough time with. I've read Dubliners, and I've read A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. I have Ulysses, I have Finnegan's Wake. I'm too scared to read them. I've had my eye on his letters on eBay, actually, for about a week or two. I'm thinking of pulling the trigger on sometime soon. Just because I feel like he would be a really interesting person to read the letters of. But essays by James Joyce. And then really the hallmark of this book haul, and what I never expected to come out with on that day, was, you've already seen them from the thumbnail, but the complete works of Aristotle, put out by Princeton University Press as part of the Bollingen series. So I was doing a little reading. These are the Bollingen series, volume 71.2, maybe? I think that's the Roman numerals that I'm reading. But from what I could look at, and this is edited by Jonathan Barnes. But from what I can tell, the Bollingen series was originally published by the estate of Carl Jung, the psychologist, to publish his works, and then they ended up expanding it to all kinds of things, including the complete works of Aristotle. But it was disbanded or defunded in 1968, I believe, or 63, one of those two. And then Princeton Press actually picked it up and started republishing it. So this was published in, let me see, 1984, and let's see if these are like this from the same edition. 1984, yes. And I got these for a really good price. I was just talking to the owner for a little bit, just about books and things that we had found recently, and he was like, you know what, I'll just mark the price down a little bit for you. So it's good to have friends in high places. But excited to get this. I've had a bunch of ragtag editions of Aristotle. So it's nice to kind of be able to get rid of those and just put up these really nice edition of the complete stories of Aristotle, or the complete works of Aristotle. And that's what we got for today. I am planning a special video in the middle of this week to talk about my book buying habits, as well as, hopefully by then, a completed collection of a set that I've really wanted for a long time. Not necessarily a rare set, but something that I've just never pulled the trigger on, and now I have. So we'll talk about that, I think, early next week when the last book comes in. But yeah, hope you have a good day, and thanks for watching.